Welcome to all the educators watching this video. As you are well aware, the CBSE board has changed the board exam scheme and pattern for the year 2021-22. This video will provide a snapshot of the new examination pattern and focus on the different types of multiple choice questions or MCQs. Some examples of MCQs are given from the curriculum. Guidelines on designing and wording the MCQs are also given. So let's start with the session. So let's look at what has changed in the board examination scheme for 2021-22. First of all, the single board exam is now split into two examinations, one conducted in each term. In term 1, the board examination will be conducted anywhere between November to December 2021. And the term 2 board examination will be conducted anywhere between March to April 2022. Next, the term 1 exam will have 50% of the entire syllabus and term 2 will have the remaining 50%. Syllabus that is already tested in term 1 will not be tested in term 2. The syllabus will be rationalized for both term 1 and term 2 examinations. What do we mean by rationalized syllabus? Topics that are not needed are removed from the syllabus. Topics that are necessary will be kept. In addition to that, concepts that are not necessary but linked to other topics will be kept, which means that these topics will be the prerequisite knowledge to understand other essential topics. Term 1 will be of 40 marks for each subject. 10 marks is for internal assessments. Term 1 will be an MCQ based exam. There are multiple types of variety addressing different skill levels in the MCQ exam. In term 2, on the other hand, based on the condition of COVID, the term 2 board exam can be a theory exam or an MCQ based exam. So if there is no COVID or lockdown, term 2 may be a theory based, which will include case based, situation based, open-ended short and long answer questions. Once again, in term 2 also, the examination will be of 40 marks each for each subject and 10 marks will be for internal assessments. In term 1, the examination will be of 90 minutes and in term 2, it will be of 2 hours. The marks of term 1 and term 2 will be distributed to the overall score of the student for that year. Let's move on to see how the papers will be designed. In question papers, 50% of questions will address knowledge, 30% application, 20% will be reasoning based questions. There will be multiple sections in a paper. Each section will specify how many questions have to be answered by the student. Learners can exercise their choice within a section only. There will be no internal choice. Additional questions will be provided so students can make an intelligent choice. The first attempted number of questions as per choice will be evaluated and marked. For example, if the student has to attempt only 16 out of the 20 questions given, then the first 16 questions will be assessed and marked. Any extra questions attempted by the student will not be considered by the board. So we have to train our students to be very alert in making their choice of questions they wish to attempt. The question paper contains multiple sections. Instructions are given individually for each section, including the number of questions that may be attempted in that section. Now let's talk about the design of the board papers. The papers will address different competencies, HOTS, that is higher order thinking skills, data driven, that means based on the evaluation of learning outcome. Has the student learnt the content? Does the student exhibit key skills and knowledge related to the learning outcome? This will now be assessed via the paper design. Real world or real life examples will test the student's ability to extend the concepts to their world. And lastly, synoptic assessments questions will figure in the design, as these are questions that force students to link multiple concepts or learning outcomes to answer the question. So now we've understood about paper pattern and design. Let us move further to understand the framework of assessment. We know that in question papers, 50% of questions will address knowledge, 30% will focus on application of knowledge, and 20% of the questions will be reasoning based. Let's now learn how the design will be configured in each subject. Let's talk about science and math first. 50% of the paper, as we know, contains knowledge-based questions that focus on testing, remembering and understanding skills in students. Of this 50, 30% will be easy, 10% will be medium in difficulty, and 10% will be difficult. Similarly, for 30% of analytical questions, the easy, medium and difficult level all have 10%. Reasoning and evaluating are higher levels of thinking. Although the board has given a weightage of 10% for medium and 10% for difficult levels of questions, there are no question of lower difficulty or easy level. Now this breakup clearly shows how the CBSE board wants to set a fair distribution of marks to ensure that more credibility is provided during evaluation and marking. Now this was the assessment framework for science, SST and math. A similar framework in terms of weightage in skills and difficulty level is given for the design of language papers. Now let's understand for languages, how is the paper pattern and the marking scheme allocated. For languages, the reading of unseen passage will be for 10 marks. This could be a discursive passage or a factual passage with supporting inputs. The unseen passage assesses inference, vocabulary and analytical skills. Next, for 20 marks, we have extracts from the textbook. And students will be assessed on not just inferences from the text but also understanding beyond the text. And the last 10 marks is allocated for grammar. MCQs are based on grammar concepts, taking the skill level to application of grammar concepts and the reasoning of these concepts. Now all this information is of course again available on the CBSE website, which you must have already gone through. Let's move on to understand what the MCQs are and how should they be designed. Now that we know that MCQ is the basis for term 1 question paper, let's understand the different types of MCQs that will be covered in the board papers. You have simple MCQs, complex MCQs, case-based or passage-based MCQs, and reasoning-based MCQs. Let's explore each MCQ type further. Each MCQ is supported by a sample question based on a topic that many may be familiar with. The topic is photosynthesis. As we go forward, look at the characteristics of each MCQ and see how the example questions support these characteristics. Let's start with simple MCQs. Now the characteristics of simple MCQs are they have low difficulty level. That means these are simple or easy questions that directly address the content that students have learnt or content in the textbook. The skill level that students will need to solve these questions are on the lowest rung of Bloom's taxonomy, that is recall and remembering. A simple MCQ will have one question stem and 4 options for students to choose as their answer. And when you design a simple MCQ, think of a question stem that a student can answer even by hiding the choices of answers. It should be so apparent and so simple. Let's look at an example from the topic of plants make food. This is an example of a simple MCQ. Which of the following are called producers? This is the question stem, and the 4 options are animals, green plants, all living things, humans. Of course, the correct answer is B. But if you notice, let's try to understand the design of the simple MCQ. So in the example, the language of the question is very simple and easy to understand. That's the first quality that you have to pay attention to while designing simple MCQs. It uses terms straight from the textbook for students to connect with. No ambiguity at all. The choices are 4 in number. One of the choices is of course the correct answer, but the others are distractors. By distractors we mean choices that are incorrect. Now in simple MCQs, the choices are individual and dissimilar. By this we mean they do not overlap in content. In this manner, the students can immediately pinpoint the answer. Simple MCQs are what all teachers are accustomed to and require very little effort in designing the question. Now let's look at complex MCQs. Complex MCQs have medium difficulty level. That means they are slightly more difficult than simple MCQs, but they still directly address the content students have learnt or content in the textbook. However, the design of the MCQs will be more varied. In this type of MCQ, you can have 2 different variations. One is a combination MCQ, which will have multiple statements in the question stem and a combination of answers as the choices. And sequence MCQ, which are considered as complex because they involve putting different elements of the answer in a proper order. The skill level that students will need to solve these questions are not just recall and remembering, but also understanding of its concept. So as we move into complex MCQs, we are going higher up in the Bloom's taxonomy in terms of skills that students will need to solve such MCQs. Let's look at an example. Now this is a combination MCQ. In the combination selection, as we said, multiple statements are there along with the main question in the question stem. For example, over here you have which of the following is true about plants, and then 4 statements are given. Students have to identify which of the statements are true. Now, if you look at the choices that are given for students over here, the choices are a combination of the statements given. So, the multiple choice answer is where the combination comes into effect. Again, out of the 4 possible combinations, only one combination is correct, and here the answer is number 3, A and C. When you design a combination MCQ, think of at least 2 statements that are facts with regards to the central idea that you are posing in the question stem. Now let's move on to sequencing or ordering of complex MCQs. A sequencing MCQ can only be designed for conceptual processes that involve a series of steps to complete. In this example, the process is that of photosynthesis, which involves a series of steps. While designing the sequence MCQ, ensure that you use the same terminology indicating the step-by-step process as given in the textbook. Complex MCQs have been designed by teachers in the past to help students develop their understanding of concepts. Very little to some effort is required in designing such questions. So now we've understood two of the types of MCQs, that's simple MCQ and concept MCQ. Let's go to the next MCQ type, which is case-based or passage-based MCQ. Let's look at the characteristics of these MCQs. Case-based or passage-based MCQs have a high difficulty level. These are more difficult than complex MCQs as they are based on a textual extract or a case study that students have to analyze. The passage or case study can be based on one or multiple concepts that are learned by the students on a particular topic. Students have to read the passage and analyze the message conveyed by the content. All the questions in the MCQ are linked to that particular case study or that particular passage. Let's look at an example for case-based or passage-based MCQ from the same chapter that we have explored so far, which is plants make food or photosynthesis. A case-based MCQ related to that: Mr. Dev went on vacation with his family. He was sure that his plants would survive for 1 week, but just in case he took extra care to put them on his terrace for adequate sunlight before leaving on his vacation. But when he returned, he saw that his beloved plants were wilted and almost dead. Within a week, Mr. Dev revived his plants. So this was the case study that is given to the students. Now the case study is clearly linked to the process of photosynthesis that plants carry out to make food and thereby they survive. It's based on a real life event that many of us have gone through, that is lack of care of our plants. The language is simple and easy to understand. How is it connected to photosynthesis? Because here the student has to understand how the real life case links to the concept in the textbook or the multiple concepts that are related to photosynthesis, and accordingly apply the learning to answer the questions. Now this is the case study. We'll show you the next slide, which provides questions based on this case study. The questions can be simple, complex or reasoning questions, but they have to be connected to the case study. Here's an example. Why did Mr. Dev's plant almost die? There was no fresh air, plants got very little sunlight, plants did not get any water, and they were indoor plants. So the answer here is C, because they did not get any water, because in the case study he has put it in a location where there's plenty of sunlight and fresh air. So obviously the plants did not get any water and hence they were dried and wilted. So this clearly connects to the case study. Let's move on to passage-based MCQs. The same holds true with the passage-based MCQ as we saw the design for case study or case-based MCQs. The passage is designed by combining different statements from the textbook with self-written statements. The language of the passage is simple and easy to understand. Here the student has to understand how the passage links to the concepts in the textbook and accordingly apply the learning. Now if you look at the passage on your screen, you can see that it is written in simple language and not textbook language. This is the difference between a case-based and a passage-based. In a passage-based, you do take statements from the textbook, but you simplify the language because students have to understand the content or show or demonstrate their understanding of the content. Let's look at some questions that are related to passage-based MCQs. So in the next slide, we can see that these two questions are related to the passage that was shown to you just now. In these questions, the students have to analyze the experiment and infer based on the concepts understood in the classroom. Let's move on to the next type of MCQ, and this is reasoning-based MCQ. Reasoning questions focus on developing skills involving evaluating or making judgments on these concepts. The student will have to analyze the concepts in the classroom and apply them to answer the MCQ. Reasoning questions have the highest level of difficulty for this very reason. they command the use of higher cognitive skills to answer. The content of reasoning questions doesn't focus on one concept alone but also connects to the prior knowledge during the evaluation. Assertion reason and negative reasoning are two MCQ types that fall under this category of reasoning MCQs. Let's understand what they are. Let's first talk about assertion reason questions. So in an assertion reason MCQ, two statements are given. An assertion statement, let's call it A, and a reason statement, let's call that R. Now both statements are individual. They may or may not be connected to each other, but if they are connected, then R will be the reason for A, or R is the explanation for why A occurs. Based on these two statements, learners have to select the four options to determine if there is a connection between the A assertion statement or R reason statement, and state which statements are true and false. Students have to decide on any of the four reason options pertaining to A and R, which is given A and R, an assertion and reason statement. They have to decide whether both A and R are true and R is the correct explanation of A, or both A and R are true but R is not the correct explanation of A. Option is A is true but R is false, and the last option, A is false but R is true. Students have to remember that A and R should always be considered as independent statements, and no link should be established between the two unless and until they can provide a valid explanation. For example, let's look at the screen and see. Assertion statement: green plants control the greenhouse effect and help manage global warming. The reason being, green plants maintain the carbon dioxide level of the atmosphere. From this we know that if we look at each statement individually, we know that A is a true statement and we know that R is also a true statement. So given that both A and R are true, either my option is A or my option is B. If my option has to be A, then my reason has to be connected to my assertion. That means R has to be the reason for A being true. So green plants maintain the carbon dioxide level of the atmosphere, and hence they control the greenhouse effect and help manage global warming. These are both true, and A is correctly justified or validated by R. That means R is a correct reasoning for A, and hence my answer is option A. So in this manner, the students have to independently evaluate these statements and then see if there is a link between the two. There are some more examples coming up for you to understand. Please read what's on the screen and evaluate why the answers are C and D respectively. Now we come to the last type of MCQ under reasoning MCQs, which is negative reasoning. Now negative reasoning is a type of reasoning question where a negative statement is given to the students to validate using the choice of answers. Now designing of negative reasoning questions is quite easy. Consider the learning outcome and focus on what the students have learned. Then ask them negative reasoning questions that go against or negate or are opposite to what they have learned. The screen has an example for you that shows negative reasoning. Which plants do not produce food in their leaves via photosynthesis? And the four options are pine trees, banyan trees, cacti, and Venus flytrap. The correct answer is cacti. So in this negative reasoning question, the word not is what negates the concept of photosynthesis in different plants. Now, the design of MCQs is closely linked to the Bloom's taxonomy. The lower order skills are what majority of MCQs are designed to test. Most MCQs often target the lower order skills. However, the higher order skills can also be assessed using MCQs, except for the highest level, which is creating. The higher order skills can be tested using reasoning MCQs and some complex MCQs also. Let's understand how to design higher order MCQs. Let's understand the first one, how to design case-based and paragraph-based MCQs. Now, this flow chart or this process diagram shows you the step-by-step process for designing case-based or paragraph-based MCQs. The purpose or the goal of a case-based question is to walk the student through a situation, a real-life situation, where a problem is presented and some background information is provided. The case may be taken from real life or fictional. But any case must be written keeping one to many multiple concepts in mind. Now, a case-based questions can be written to encourage the student to review the solution that was implemented. These are the ways in which you can write a case-based question. The first one is you pose a problem. The students have to find out solutions. What is the best solution? The MCQ has multiple solutions, out of which one is correct. The next is, given a problem and multiple solutions, what is the best solution or the most accurate solution? This is another case-based. And last, pose the case with an ineffective solution. So, you are giving them a case study and you are talking about a solution that has been given which is ineffective. Your choices can be statements that talk about why was it ineffective. When you are designing case-based or paragraph-based MCQs, make sure that your questions are not long, because they will take up time to read and understanding during the examination, and we don't want students to waste excessive time in reading the passage. So, let's see another example of case-based MCQs on the photosynthesis concept. Now, this is related to the forest fires in the Amazon forest that were burning for almost continuously 6 months in the year 2020. So, this is a real life case, a real life example, and the question is, how do forest fires increase the carbon dioxide? Because the Amazon rainforest was burning for almost 6 months at a stretch. It was the Brazilian Amazon forest, the Brazilian land, and the carbon dioxide levels in Brazil increased by nearly 20%. So, the question is, why do forest fires increase the level of carbon dioxide? And accordingly, students have to answer the case. Now, let's understand how to design passage-based MCQs. The purpose of a passage-based MCQ is to assess the single or multiple concepts via text from the textbook. This shows the student how the concepts are linked to each other. The text may be an entire paragraph or lines from different sections of the textbook or reworded lines from the textbook. The paragraph must be written in simplified language and conveying the same meaning as the textual language. It must be linked to one or many concepts. Here is an example of passage-based MCQ from the same chapter, Plants Make Food. The passage is given, energy is required to carry out life processes, animals get energy from the foods they eat, etc. So, this is a very short passage. But my questions that are based on that my questions that are based on that chapter are: what are green plants called because of their ability to make their own food? And what raw materials are used to make the food? That answer is not in the passage. They have to infer the answer using the knowledge that they have acquired through this chapter on this concept. So this was addressing the design of case-based and passage-based MCQs. Let's understand how to design assertion reason questions. Now in assertion and reason questions, the assertion as well as the reason are both statements of fact. They can provide a fact, an opinion, or they can provide a comment. There need not be a relationship between the two statements. There is a misconception that the assertion is a statement that is always defended or justified by the reason. That is, the reason is a cause for the assertion, which is wrong. This need not be a link between assertion and reason statement at any point of time. How do we design our assertion and reason questions? The link between the assertion and reason is determined by the answer you wish to establish through the question. What answer do you want the students to give correctly? Let's understand this further. It may sound confusing, but I will simplify it for you. Now, these are the four answers, four options, that the 5 options that the students may get. Both A and R are true, and R is the correct explanation of A. Both A and R are true, but R is not the correct explanation of A. A is true, but R is false. A is false, but R is true. Or both can be false. Mostly the last statement is not given, but the first 4 options are always there. Now, what we said, that the multiple choice answers itself help decide how you want to design your assertion reason question. So if you want students to answer A, if you want the answer to be A, that is both A and R are true and R is the correct explanation of A, then you have to ensure that A is a statement of fact that is explained by R, which is also a statement of fact. Means both are true. For example, green plants are producers. Reason, green plants make their own food. So here I am forcing the answer A, the option A. Now if I want my option to be B, then I have to ensure that A and R are independently true. A is an independent true statement and R is an independent true statement, but they are not related. So over here, example, green plants are producers, humans are heterotrophs. Both are correct statements. They are both true. But R is not the correct explanation of A. Again, it is linked to what you want the students to answer. If you want students to answer B, both A and R are true, but R is not the correct explanation of A, you have to ensure that A and R are independently true statements. They are not linked to each other. Next, if you want the answer to be C, that means A is true but R is false. Then you have to ensure that A is true, it's a true statement, but R is any independent false statement that is within the same context or the same content topic. It's connected only by topic and not reasoning. Okay. So for the photosynthesis topic, green plants are producers, green plants are heterotrophs. So A is definitely true, but R, green plants are not heterotrophs, they are autotrophs. So this is a false statement. So here with these statements, I am making my students answer the question C. Now if you want the option to be D, that is A is false, R is true, you have to apply the reverse. You have to ensure that A is an independently false statement for that topic and are is an independently true statement for that topic. For example, here the dew on leaves is due to photosynthesis, and are stomata help the plants give out excess water. Here are is definitely an independent fact which is true, and the assertion is not true, it's a false statement. Lastly, if this option is available to students and you want both answers to be false, that means assertion and reason are false, ensure that A and R are both false statements. They are incorrect statements. That means if you look at the photosynthesis topic, A, the pores on the leaves of green plants are always open. R, the pores on the leaves of green plants are called stipules. So both are incorrect in their own statement, and hence we have both are false. So it's really easy to design an assertion and reason question. There is no need to panic, there is no need to be confused about the language you have to use for assertion and reason questions. Now we have a practice question for you. Let's see if you can apply that rule. The assertion statement is music is soothing for everybody, and the reason is the rhythmic sounds stimulate the brain and produce a soothing effect. The correct answer to this is D, which is A is false but R is true. You may have thought that A is correct and R is a correct explanation for A also, but here you must be aware of the word everybody in the assertion statement. The word everybody makes the statement false, as not every person considers music as soothing. The assertion refers to an emotional effect of music on a person, but the reason refers to a scientific effect of music on a person, which is a proven fact. So reason has been proven, the reason has been scientifically proven, so it is a fact, it is true, but A is not true. Hence the answer is D, A is false, R is true. This was a general example. Let's see if you can answer this example from social science. So A, the French Revolution played a critical role in showing the world the power of the people. And R, the French citizens successfully uprooted the centuries-old institution of absolute monarchy and feudalism. The answer is A, but why is the answer A? So for over 100 years, the French royals or monarchs, they committed a lot of atrocities or torture on the people, just to declare their power over the people. The people were tired of this abuse, and hence they decided to revolt against it. And this revolt was called the French Revolution, and it was successful. This showed the world that torture is wrong and the people have the power to overcome such rulers. It was the power of the people that successfully brought down the monarchs and their rule. Thus A is true and R is also true. If A is true and R is true and R is the correct explanation for A, then my answer will be option A. So now you have understood how to design assertion and reason questions. Let's move on to introduce you to different other types of MCQs that you can use in your paper for the design of questions. So these are some MCQs for languages or even for social sciences. So we can design vocabulary based MCQ, fact versus opinion MCQ, state of mind MCQs, title name association MCQs. Let's see some example of these MCQs. A vocabulary based MCQ tests the student's knowledge of vocabulary in context with the concept that they have learnt. The text in the question stem is generally paraphrased or rephrased with simple words to test the understanding of terminology or vocabulary on that topic. In this example from English, which is chapter 2, Long Walk to Freedom, a sentence from the textbook is reworded to test the student's understanding of new vocabulary introduced in the chapter. So the question stem reads like this: a part of the extract has been paraphrased. Choose the option that includes the most appropriate solutions to the blanks in the paraphrased text. It was not until the speaker grew up to be a young man when it blank on him that he was dash of freedom. Then he began dash it. So the words dawn, deprived, desiring are have to be used in correct context for that particular sentence. So the answer is B. The next type of language or social science MCQ that you can design is called a fact versus opinion MCQ. This depicts a dialogue between two prominent characters in a story. The dialogue may be directly from the textbook or implied from the story. Students will need to read the dialogues and determine, in context with their story, whether the dialogue is a fact or an opinion. In this example, 4 dialogues of Nelson Mandela are considered, and the student has to evaluate if these are facts or opinions of the speaker. Now, similar design can also be made for social studies, where prominent figures in history are shown to discuss the events in history. Converting historical events into dialogues as facts and opinions is what makes it an interesting MCQ for social science. The state of mind MCQ can be designed also very easily. You have to simply consider a character in a story or personality in a historical event and ask students to state whether what the character is feeling in context with that event in history or with that event in the story. In this example, the student has to decide on the emotions that are felt by Mr. Nelson Mandela as he gives his speech during the inauguration of South Africa's first democratic government. Similarly, you can make such MCQs for social science using popular personalities from history. The last type of MCQ that we'd like to introduce to you for languages or social science is a title name association MCQ. This is about selecting an appropriate title for the image text given in the question stem. Students have to understand the picture or the text that is given in the question stem in context with the topic and accordingly decide which is an appropriate name or how to name or give a title to the picture or the text in the question. Again, this can be designed for both social science as well as language papers. Now, these are some MCQ types that can be designed for social science and languages. Let's look at what can be designed for science, math and computers. These are supportive MCQs as they are supported by a resource that the students have to explore to answer the MCQ. These MCQ designs are appropriate for science, math and IT because they include data-based MCQ, diagram or picture-based MCQs or experiment-based MCQs. Let's look at data-based MCQs. Here the question stem will have data represented either graphically or as a table. The data has to be interpreted by the students in context with the topic they have learned. The question stem will talk about what the data represents and the question the students have to answer after analyzing the data. This MCQ design can also be explored for languages where the content is non-fiction and data can be gathered connecting the topic. Diagram or picture-based MCQs talk about testing the students' knowledge on a diagram that they have learnt in context with a particular topic. So the diagram from the textbook with parts labeled is given. Question stems can address the function of the parts, labeling of the parts, location of the parts, or the role of the parts in a particular process or system. So in this example, the students have to correctly identify which part is correctly described as in its function. Now, an experiment-based MCQ is designed around an experiment that the students have learned for any given topic. Incomplete steps to an experiment, incomplete labeling of the experiment's equipment, inference from an experiment can be some of the question stems for this type of MCQ. We have sent you some MCQ documents for particular subjects. Pick up this document that is connected to your subject. Read through the examples given for a particular topic. Study the questions and compare them to what you have learned on how to design such MCQs. Now let's look at some strategies or guidelines for students for answering multiple choice questions. Now often students are a little confused on how to solve MCQs that focus on higher order thinking skills specifically. These guidelines are meant to be understood by the teacher, to be shared with the students to prepare them for the exam. Let's look at some general guidelines. So when you look at an MCQ, read the stem of the MCQ thoroughly. When you read a multiple choice question in its entirety, you have to understand the question stem before you answer the options. Students, sometimes they think that they know what a question is asking before reading it and jump straight to the most logical answer. This is the big mistake, and it can cost you dearly on multiple choice exams. You have to read each question thoroughly before reviewing the answer options. Next, you have to understand the concept that the MCQ is addressing. It could be one or many concepts. From the question, you will get an idea of the concept. Be aware that the concept may be linked to others. Hence, reading the questions 2 to 3 times will help you understand all the concepts that the question is linked to. Read the multiple choice question choices thoroughly. This will help you understand how they link to the question stem. Be aware that only 1 out of the 4 choices is correct. However, there may be an overlap in choices where the wordings may slightly differ and confuse you regarding the correct answer. Read the choices properly and understand what they are saying. The process of elimination may help you. By elimination, we mean strike out all the answers you know are incorrect. Then focus on the remaining choices. It narrows it down. So out of 4 choices, if you think 2 choices are definitely wrong, they're not the correct answer, you can focus on the remaining 2. It reduces or narrows your options so that you can focus better. This strategy also saves time and it increases your likelihood of selecting the correct answer. Select the best answer. That is the answer that comes closest to the correct answer if in doubt. So if you're having difficulty answering a question, move on and come back to tackle it once you've answered all the questions you know. Sometimes answering easier questions first can offer you insight into answering more challenging questions. When you select the best answer to the question, suppose you don't know the answer for sure, you select the best answer, these answers will seem correct, and hence making an educated guess for the question is not a wrong strategy. In fact, since there is no negative marking, an educated guess can be very helpful for you to select the correct answer. Let's look at some tips and strategies for solving assertion reason MCQs. Now you know assertion reason addresses these 4 options where you're given both assertion and reason as individual statements. So here's the step-by-step guideline. You have to read the assertion statement and read the reason statement. Read them as 2 independent statements. Don't try to find a link immediately. Now, check. Is the assertion true? If it is true, again check, is the reason true? If the reason is true, then when A and R are both true, you need to check if R is the correct explanation for A. If it is the correct explanation for A, then the answer or your choice from the multiple choices is A. However, if A and R are true but R does not correctly explain A, then the answer is B. Very simple, very logical. Now let's look at a different perspective. You have read this assertion statement A and the reason statement R. You understood both of them. Check if A is a true statement and R is a true statement. Now, if A is a true statement but R is not a true statement, then your answer is C, which is A is true but R is false. But if A is not a true statement and R is a true statement, then your answer is D. That means A is false, R is true. Responding to assertion reason questions is not as difficult as it may seem. Yet this is the MCQ that most students get confused about. Keep these steps in mind in order to deal with assertion and reason questions in a logical and sensible manner. So this brings us to the end of our video. We hope you found the information shared in this video informative. Do send us your feedback on the video, and also if you have any further queries, do let us know. You can send your feedback queries to the email IDs on the screen. We wish you all the best and good luck to all the teachers and the students in the board exam for 21-22.